and then we'll get started. So hello, everyone. This is JQ Hannah, the Assistant Director of Food Co-op Initiative, and thank you for coming and joining us for our Fall 22 FCI Live series. We're in our second week, and this is going to be Black Co-ops and Forward Mobility with Kenya Baker from Dayton Unified Power. We're super psyched to have her here doing a whole session with us. She's been on panel with FCI Live before, but this is exciting, so we have her doing a whole session. She will tell you all about herself and her work, but you will probably know her best from her powerful organizing work with Gem City Market in Dayton, Ohio. And she'll tell you about some of the work she's doing now, I think, as well. One of just a powerhouse of community organizer, and really excited to have her here with us tonight. And with that, I will turn it over to Kenya.
Hi, everyone. Hopefully everyone's been having a great conference. I am glad that you guys took the time to check in with this session on organizing and asset-based community development and forming partnerships within your respective communities. Of course, I've been here in Dayton, Ohio, organizing. Hi, Linda. Hi, Don. How's everybody doing? Hopefully great. And I hope that you all get what you all expected from this session. I have prepared a presentation, so I'm going to pull my slides up. Are you all getting a lot of background, or can you hear me fine?
We are hearing you good. There's a very slight background sound, but it's not disruptive.
Okay, great. So I went back and forth with how to title this, and I came up with Let's Stay Together. Forming partnerships in our community and creating relationships in our community sometimes can be challenging because of some of the systemic issues that I noted in my synopsis of this session. I'm not going to read it. I'm sure you all read it in order to choose this session, but I really wanted to focus on asset-based community development and really talk about some of the ways that I was able to hurdle over some of those issues that are systemic in our community and can detract or cause us to be stagnated in our growth when it comes to organizing. So I wanted you guys to just think about for a minute, and we're not going to take 3 to 5 minutes, but if you all can drop in the chat any questions that you really want answered based off of the synopsis that you all read to sign up for this session, then please drop them in the chat, and I'm going to try to make sure that I circle back and have time to look at those questions and address them in case they're not answered throughout the presentation. So I want to start off talking about stakeholders. So those are the people that we meet, whether they are investors, whether they're supporters, volunteers, collaborators. Sometimes they're just onlookers. I can't tell you how many times I met someone at the beginning of our march towards opening up the grocery store, and it wasn't until the end when the doors were getting ready to open and we were finished up with the groundbreaking, and literally like even a couple after the doors opened that came and said, I want to join. I want to become a member. Some of those people just need that proof of concept, and that's understandable. But those commonalities and differences are important to consider, because a lot of people came because they saw other Black faces and they wanted to see what we were organizing around. And then a lot of them came because they experienced the same types of disenfranchisement, because if you lived in our zip codes, then you knew that you were also facing the challenge that Gem City Market faced as organizers, and that was a lack of food access. So just to give you a little bit of background, because it really lends itself to mission alignment, we were living in a food apartheid. Typically, you may have called it referred to as food desert, but we're drifting away from that terminology because desert implies that it's something that God caused. And really, food deserts are the result of disenfranchisement, divestment, corporations just choosing not to place their corporate locations within our zip codes. And when I say our zip codes, I'm referring to African Americans, areas where we have high concentrations of individuals. And we've seen that disenfranchisement across the board, not just with food, but also with housing, with redlining. And because of that, we find a lot of other individuals from different ethnic backgrounds and from different religions, lots of differences, but we came together on a common cause, which was food access. Here also you see, to consider the people that you will end up working with are the relationships with other stakeholders. I tell people oftentimes in organizing, for every one person you talk to, you in reality are talking to 20 people. So don't just think of if 2 people show up for a pop ed series, or maybe only 5 show up for a meeting. Go ahead and multiply that by 20, because when they say word of mouth is the best form of advertising, that's how news travels fastest. It's on our lips. We are our own walking billboards. And if you can take the passion that you have for your movement and infuse it into one, you're infusing it into 20. So those relationships that others have are great ways of forming relationships and building your stakeholder repertoire, so to speak. And then also you want to consider, as you start working with stakeholders, kind of try to foresee what those possible conflicts of interest may be. And it kind of helps you to get ahead of your story and to get ahead of that relationship, because this is all about relationship building. So here, I wanted to talk a little bit, because I really wanted to focus on asset-based community development, a little bit about the types of assessments for gifts. Talents are based on our social histories, our work experience, our God-given abilities, what we're just born to do. Some of us come out the womb like tinkering and playing with electronics, and some of the things that we do are kind of quirky. They might be out of the box, not common hobbies that people have. But whatever it is that we're doing that is our gift, we normally find ourselves deeply involved in that to a point where it's our passion. And that's what you really want to identify with these stakeholders to really get maximum engagement. You want to identify what is it that they love to do, they would do for free. You wouldn't have to pay them anything, and they would show up faithfully, and they would work to their best ability. And that's how you really can identify a gift and a talent in your stakeholders and work towards longevity in that relationship. So when you get to making these relationships, you're going to ask yourself, how can I formalize this relationship? So I wanted to talk a little bit about MOUs. And this was really, I designed this presentation based off of the disenfranchised Black population. And that's what this session was really focused on. And many times in our community, we're not familiar with memorandums of understanding. And that's what that MOU is. And it should have these components at bare minimum. You want to name who it is that's involved in this agreement between people. Sometimes our stakeholders are people that we are actually looking to develop contractual relationships with. And those contractual relationships really flourish when there's clear expectations. So this MOU allows for you to set up clear expectations of what that relationship will look like. And think about when you're naming the parties at the beginning of this MOU, there's many drafts online, but you'll see also known as part of that header, as part of that introduction of who's coming together to form an agreement. Really consider some of those other names, whether it's an acronym or it may just be a pseudo name that organization or that individual goes by. You want to include that. Names are important, especially in building relationships within our communities. When you can remember a person's name, you're remembering the most important word in all language across the board. It really speaks to a person's heart when you remember their name and you become familiar with them. So do your research. That MOU also holds some history. It impresses your stakeholder that you're going into relationship with when you've dug deep and really uncovered like the foundation of their organization. It's just like going on a job interview. You come off better with that potential employer when you can tell something about that company. It's the same way with relationship building. When you create that first draft and you're ready to get it over to your partner, when you've done some research and you've really found out, how did that company start off? Who were the founders? What was their mission originally? Because sometimes people's missions change. So really doing your research there. Then the deliverables is what you're going to bring to the table. In that relationship, there's always give and takes. So you want to really think about what it is that you want to see at the end of that relationship, if you have the type of relationship that lends itself to an MOU. Then the purpose, the whole purpose of coming together. Again, this is more of a joint expectation. The deliverables are kind of what you expect and what the partner is expecting. But the purpose is more or less what that relationship is going to bring to your entire community. Perhaps there's some processes and some procedures. Maybe some invoices will be turned in. Maybe you have a certain expectation of what that's going to look like. This is the place in process and procedures where you spell out those steps. And then funding. Sometimes relationships, for example, one of the things we did around organizing with the grocery store and with the land trust is we started a garden. And that garden, we had to go into relationships with different stakeholders, churches. We went into relationship with another community-based organization. And there were some expectations. We served as a fiscal sponsor in one of those relationships. So how do those checks come in? Who are they written to? Who's going to send in the thank you note? So really thinking about funding and how the project or the relationship is going to be funded in the case that funding is an issue. If one of these different areas is not an issue, then you don't have to worry about it. You just don't include it in that MOU. Duration, sometimes again, when you're talking about a memorandum of understanding, it's more of a formal agreement. So it may only last a year. Sometimes it helps too to spell that out, because this helps to build relationships that are built on integrity. Because now you're letting that partner know, I'd like to work with you for 6 months. I'd like to work with you for a year. And it really helps them to compartmentalize that relationship in the grand scheme of their work. And then insurances. In the case where we were using the church's van to transport youth, we wanted to make sure who was holding the insurance on those vehicles. Was it necessary for the driver to have their own personal insurance? And then, of course, you would have signatures with you and the parties. Now, this is, again, for a formal relationship that you're entering into with one of your talented and gifted stakeholders. You also may want to consider some informal agreements. Many of the relationships that I forged, and I'm really learning this now, was just based on volunteerism. But when people come to work with us and to share their gifts and their talents, it still helps to have those clear, spelled out expectations. And that's what the volunteer agreement does. It lets them know that they're not being expected to do anything above and beyond a certain specific set of duties. For example, when I transitioned from being a volunteer into being a formal coordinator for outreach engagement, someone else stepped into my shoes. At that point, it was important, and I knew that one of the gaps in my understanding was not having that agreement. So we developed that agreement, and they knew, okay, as a volunteer, I'll be tabling at events. As a volunteer, I'll be helping with special events meetings held by the Gem City Market, helping with setup, helping with breakdown. Maybe the volunteer is just allowing you to utilize their home for a house party. House parties are really great ways for us to meet stakeholders and people that they have relationships with. So whatever the relationship is, when it comes to volunteerism, you may want to consider the volunteer agreement. Another great way that I found to engage stakeholders in my community was through doing some physical activities. We had a cornhole team. We also had walkers. So I dubbed them Gem City Walkers. And we would meet at our construction site and we would walk that neighborhood and pick up trash. Well, that's a physical activity. So it was important that I indemnified the market through a liability waiver. And none of these documents have to be anything extensive. I'm not talking about 3 pages or 2 pages. I'm talking about sometimes just a half sheet. All it does is it simply releases your operation, your market, or whatever your movement may be as a cooperative from any liability to the individuals that are partaking in it. And it really helped. And it also lends itself for another branding and marketing opportunity because you put your logo on there and it gives you an opportunity to, again, put that in front of your people. And it shows a level of professionalism as well. People feel safe when they see that you've gone through some measures to make sure that they're covered and you're covered. Norm agreements. I like norm agreements because oftentimes when we come into spaces and we have, whether it's a meeting or for us, we had many popular education sessions, it was important that we set norms. And not only the norms were set like on some butcher paper or chart paper, but sometimes we would do like half sheet or a quarter sheet, just saying, I agree with these norms. And what that helps you to do, you can capture important information like names, phone numbers, and emails, but you also can have some expectations that carry over. So now they know when I come to a meeting for a Gem City Market or for one of your cooperatives, they know this is what I can expect. We're going to pass a talking piece, or we're going to always give, they say, err on the side of good intention. We're always going to assume good intention whenever someone speaks. So we're not going to jump to any bad conclusions. I like norm agreements. Support pledges. That's another informal agreement. Sometimes people aren't ready to sign on the dotted line, but they do want to make a pledge. They want to make a commitment. And a lot of times that helps people then to hold themselves accountable to what you're working towards, whether that's getting that $100 membership or however you have your cooperative created based off of whatever your giving is, they can sign up for it. Sometimes people, especially in our community, they still struggle with just survival mode and check to check. And it helps them to be able to say, hey, I do want to make a commitment. I don't have it right now, but I want to give it later. So pledges are a great informal agreement for people to sign up and make that commitment without yet making the commitment. And then I put on here participation agreements. A lot of times when we go door to door, we meet people and we want them to start participating, but they really don't have any specific on-ramp that they're ready to take. I might suggest, hey, would you like to volunteer? Or how about coming to this next meeting? But they don't really know how to commit yet. so they can look over a participation agreement, and it may have all of those things outlined for them to consider for later. You can have a little place on the back where they can put a stamp on it, send it in to you. A lot of times we need to give individuals time to make decisions. Everyone's not an impulse shopper. Some people need time to consider what it is that you're offering, even after talking with you about it. I remember one gentleman we met when we were out knocking on doors. We were actually getting ready to open, months away from it. And we started a receipt drive, because by collecting individuals' receipts, that let us know how we should stock our shelves. And so in that receipt drive, we just asked people, hey, when you go to the grocery store, could you please send us in your receipts? So we did some door knocking to get receipts, asking people, we want to know what the common items are that you're purchasing so that we can put them closer to your fingertips by shelving them at the Gem City Market. So I met this guy there, and he was really interested in getting involved. Interesting fellow. He had his house all adorned. It was like a museum almost. And we had great conversation, but he really wasn't sure how he wanted to on-ramp. He thought about seeking employment with us, and he gave us some receipts, but he really, he did tell us about getting some shrimp on our shelves as well, but he really wasn't sure about the engagement piece. He did end up coming to work for us, but we were able to give him a participation agreement so that he could look over some of the opportunities for him to start getting involved. Sometimes you have speakers too, and consider that. People that want to talk about the market, they want to be an ambassador. So perhaps you may have someone who could take on some of those speaking opportunities after you've done some coaching. So that's a great way to get people involved too. Really tapping into those talents though will help you to be able to partake in that participation agreement and coming up with the different ways and modes. Hey.
I know it's me, but I have a quick question. So when you say participation agreement, this is like a list of all the different ways they could engage?
Yes.
Okay. And do you kind of like ramp them up? Is it like, oh, here are entry level ways, or do you like even put in like, be on a committee? Do you just, how much do you put on there?
Yes, we normally start off, we let it be like maybe like five to seven things. I think is the most that we would put on there. But yes, they would range from volunteering to actually working with the co-op, helping with mailers. Oftentimes we will want to send out some information through the mail, whether it's thank you notes, and we want to put our personal touch on it. So we want them to be handwritten. So that would take time, and groups would sit down to do that. Tabling at events.
And did you guys change and update that list as like you had different needs?
We did. We changed it a few times.
Like it.
Yeah. Nice. Good question. Anyone else have any questions or comments? I know I've been said to be a speedy presenter. All right, so let's keep going. So once we are starting to form these relationships, it's very important that we are able to maintain them. So I wanted to include 3 tips here that we should consider. Be sure to not overtax relationships. Sometimes you meet that person and they have all the talent in the world, and your first impulse is to call them as soon as you have a need, a want, or a desire in your organizing. But just be careful not to put it all on one person, because you have thousands of people in your different communities that you could perhaps talk with. And that's a good time too to work with some of those individuals that you have that have relationships with other stakeholders. The saying, birds of a feather flock together, is very true. So anytime that you can get information from one stakeholder with regards to other stakeholders that share those talents. Do that so that you can spread the wealth of all the work goes into starting up your co-op. And then I have one-on-ones. One-on-ones are a great way to really spend time with stakeholders that doesn't take a lot of time, but it's just enough. We're talking about 15 to 20 minutes on average, just sitting down and learning about the people in your community. Again, relationships are not formed by osmosis, they take time. And so taking that little bit of time with individuals and circling back, don't forget to circle back. Oftentimes we build relationships and we build so many. As I said, there's thousands of people to work with in our communities. We forget to circle back, and that's very important. And a great tool to help with circling back are CRMs. A common one is MailChimp, and we really utilize MailChimp at the beginning of our work. MailChimp. You can use it, up to 2,500 people can be loaded into that database, and it really helps you to keep track of those partner relationships and your touch points. And you can also use it to do campaigns. So if you want to do mass email lists, MailChimp's a great way to go. So with regards to sustaining those relationships, this is a very important tip that I learned from one of my community elders. There are no permanent friends and there are no permanent enemies. There's only a permanent agenda. And that is so important. I used to be a school teacher for 17 years. And a principal once told me something that stuck with me. She said, you don't throw babies out with bathwater. And that's so important. We all make mistakes along this walk of life, and we sometimes step on each other's toes. But if you have a shared vision and a shared mission that you identify, you want to keep that mission first. And that mission is really your baby. And those people, the different things that happen with people, life happens. But we have to have a forgiving heart as we go through this work, because this work is huge. It is not a light burden, and we really need one another to help carry it. And so don't forsake or sacrifice a relationship, because it's not about the problems, it's about the solutions. And regardless of what your focus is, be it energy conservation, sometimes people are working on co-ops to put in solar panels, or saving the ozone. Perhaps you want to reduce the waste that goes to the landfills. Regardless of what your co-op is built on, you want to always maintain a pathway and a bridge to your stakeholders. It's very important that those lines of communication remain open. So don't take a long time to say, I'm sorry, or it was my mistake. Be quick to forgive, and you'll be quick to be forgiven, is what I've learned in this work. And remember, this is the reason why I say that time is of an essence, because you could lose a cell phone, get a cell phone back. Lose $100, get $100 back. But that time is something, once you spend it, it's gone. So really consider, as you're out here organizing and working collectively, how your time is being spent. Your time is extremely valuable. And this work involves a lot of complexity and tension, but lean into it. That guitar makes no sound whatsoever until you pull out that pluck and you pluck on it. And the way that those strings are pulled, that's tension. You have to lean into it to really get the harmonious love and sounds that will calm a savage beast and that will help bring peace in our communities. So lean into the tension. And sometimes there's conflict that arises, but don't be quick to cook with fire. The best cooking comes when you're cooking with smoke. Let it smoke. Wait. Sometimes tension arises. It may be too intense to deal with at the time. It's okay. Another great principal once told me, intelligent woman, went on to be a lawyer, get her law degree, and be a superintendent in a major school district. She said, the best decisions you make are the ones that you take time making. So decisions are worth taking time for. You don't have to have all the answers when you're out there organizing and building relationships. It's okay to take a moment, do some research, and get information back that people can really value and they can use for the next dimension or their next decision. I'll slow down for a second and see if anyone has any questions. We have anything in the chat or anybody thinking? Yes.
Everybody's quiet tonight. I got nothing in the chat. I've got questions, but I'm trying to behave myself.
Well, you should ask them.
Okay, well then, Don, why don't you go ahead?
I don't have a question. I just have a comment, Kenya. I'm just amazed at how much focus and attention you put, how intentional you were in building the relationships and then maintaining them. So the things that, like using the CRM to like figure out like how often you should touch base with people and how to do that and making sure that you do that. It's great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Which leads to my question on behalf of startups from all walks of communities. We've now seen there are, I would say, maybe 50% that after about, a year of organizing, it kind of become an island. Like there's the core people who got it together and some volunteers who kind of got interested, and they just go, we can't get anyone to run for it. We can't get anyone to volunteer. We can't get anyone to get involved. And it happens again and again. And you guys always have the magic to never really allow that island of like, we're these core people who care very deeply, working very hard and swear they want people to join them and do more work, yet are somehow not able to extend an offer to have others join that is working. People are not coming to them. And we're seeing this in all types of communities. What would you say is kind of how you guys avoided that, or what advice would you give to groups that they'd say they're asking people, but they kind of get on these little island of the core organizers?
Yeah, it still amazes me the rate of growth that we had with Gem City Market. And I'm talking about average cooperative growing 40 to 70 members a year, and us like growing like 1,000, 800, 500, 400 a year. And I think it had a lot to do with the fact that we really capitalized on the shared relationships amongst stakeholders, and we constantly found ourselves reinventing our methods of engagement. So I might start off with a garden in DeSoto Bass and get some individuals that come into the garden and they want to go see a movie that's coming out. This is a low income neighborhood. So then I spend my time, let me find a bus that'll be able to take you. Let me see if I can find another stakeholder that'll be able to sponsor a couple of your tickets. So I really, in education, we called it the Reggio Emilio. It's Reggio Emilio approach. This area was a war-torn area, and they had no school supplies or nothing in order to restart their educational system. And so what they did was they used project-based learning. And that's what I really use as a methodology for my outreach and engagement, rather than me coming to the table and saying, this is what we're going to do to get everyone involved. I was constantly feeding off of the people that I would engage with. And that's what I would get out of those one-on-ones. If I met with an elderly lady and she said, I've really been trying to come up with some heirloom seeds, or I need someone to help me build a bed in my backyard, then I would spend time with other stakeholders that I knew could provide her with the resource. And that's what asset-based community development is about. When you're not only finding people's gifts and their talents, but you're also finding where their needs are, because people want to exercise their gifts just as much as people have some needs that they need to have met. So it was really a coupling of identifying gifts and talents in the community, and also paying close attention to the needs and wants and desires of the community, and then finding ways. Amaha, who's our board president, said, Kenya, what do you want to do? You don't want to work at the grocery store. What do you want to do? And I said, I want to be a connector, because I got so much joy out of just connecting those gifts and talents to the needs of the community. And it really just built the movement. It really just helped people to get involved. They found purpose. That was like their way of identifying purpose, when they were able to be connected with what they either exercising their gift or getting what they needed and what they wanted at the time. And that's something that changes constantly. And that's the reason why circling back is so important.
Wow, that's incredibly insightful. Thank you. I feel like I have 5 more questions now. But
okay, we may have time to get to them.
But I'm going to let you do your slides and then and mull on some what you just said. Thank you.
My pleasure. So sometimes change does happen. Like I said, eventually our store opened. We had 5,000 plus members, and it was time to move on. And moving is important. It's important to keep moving. You'll have changes throughout the process of getting your startup started. And you just want to make sure that you are always the first person to tell your story. No one can tell your story better than you. So regardless of what it is, it may be that your marketing company goes under. It may be that your place, you're working towards site control and perhaps the building falls through. Be the first to tell your story. And there's different ways that you can do that. I've listed some of them here. Social media, email, phone calls. You can send it through a letter. You can even have a regular newsletter where you're communicating with people on an ongoing basis. Don't take for granted that people are not reading your newsletters. They're not paying attention to your movement. They are. Capitalize too on those peak algorithm times if social media is your venue. People typically are really paying attention to social media. We found out from research between the hours of 9 to 11, and then between the hours of 3 to 6. Capitalize on those times when you can really maximize your viewers. And don't be afraid to tag or to add people to it, to a post, because it gets you more exposure. Also, try to use a picture. Whenever you have a picture on a social media post, it also gets more views and more exposure across the board. Change happens. Don't fear it, because fear causes paralysis when you're scared. You all have heard about fight or flight. It's real. And so whenever change happens, just keep moving. Nothing grows in a stale pond but mold and algae. You want to be that fluid stream that's constantly refreshing and keeping your messaging pouring out to your stakeholders. They want to know about you. They've spent time and they've invested in what you are bringing to the table. So they want to be involved. So don't hold back on giving them those opportunities to really know you. And I believe that that brings me to this big, bolded lettering at the bottom. Movements move at the speed of trust. They trust you when they have built relationship with you, when you've spent time with them, learning about them. You're using their name. You know them by name. Allow people to be who they are. When they show you who they are, believe them. Oftentimes, we want to set up constructs in our mind about people. Somebody has something.
I think it's several questions. Do you want to read that aloud, or would you like me to read it?
Yeah, I'll come back to number 3. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so Ali asks terrific questions, and he asks, I'm understanding the process to create trust via shared and clear agreements, but would like to know if you consider there's a specific population percentage that is like key for takeoff. There's another question, but it's slightly different, so I thought we'll stop there.
I think that everyone is ready to make another step forward. It's just really a question of what that step is. And it's important to identify what that step is, because you want people to have firm steps. You don't want them to, feel hesitant to move on. So I want to answer your question directly with the metric, but I think that 100% of the community wants to move forward. It's just a matter of us as organizers and outreach coordinators, directors, to identify what that next step is. Everybody wants to take a step, but what is that next step? And if we're talking about community development, that's a pretty direct question. One of the things I often asked was, where do you see your community? What do you want to see in your community happen? And sometimes that'll be like an activity. It may be, a popular ed series. Popular ed was a great way for me to pull people in, because either somebody wanted to talk about a very important topic close to their heart, or they wanted to hear about it. So popular ed was a good way for me to get people engaged. And now we have virtual meeting spaces that's a really non-confrontational way. I'm an extreme extrovert, but some people are introverted and they enjoy the opportunity of being able to just get onto a virtual platform and interact. So just really, it's individual, it's really individual, but I do believe that everybody wants to take a step forward towards community development.
Ali has a second question, and I should have said, I should have finished reading your comment, Ali. So both of these questions are in the context of Black communities and food co-ops. Ali is working on Kingston Food Co-op in Kingston, New York, is a predominantly Black community. What, if anything, in your mind has changed that has made this kind of organizing harder or easier? And I think he means, as of later, since Gem City.
I think so. I don't really know how to not be honest and transparent. So I'm just going to be honest and transparent. I didn't really have an understanding of what a poverty pimp was. And through this work, I've really learned a lot about people that come to the table that say they want to support the work that's happening in Black communities, but they want to throw a lot of strings on you to the point where you almost feel like a puppet, and you don't really feel like your movement is being grassroots led. And so I think my understanding of how that dynamic works has really shifted my mind on how I operate in this space, not looking at necessarily philanthropic funds as a key way of garnering funds for this movement, looking more at structures like the real estate investment cooperative, where people can actually invest and get a return based off of a sound pro forma. Like, I'm going to build this grocery store and you can invest in this grocery store. And by you investing X amount of dollars, then you can get this amount of interest back on year 5, year 10. It works out better in the grand scheme of things than having someone come in, a corporation that has not been interested in the community up through then, and want to give you $100,000. It might sound good and look good on paper, but when you actually have to start living out, now you're going to be putting that company up front for marketing and putting their logo on this and putting their logo on that and mentioning their name in this press release. And it diminishes the value of your grassroots organizing. And it also brings along any type of negative connotations that are associated with that corporation or that agency. So that's why I said it's very important that you do your homework, because you will be shocked to find out what some of these corporations do with their money, whether it's funding mass incarceration. A lot of these large corporations own prisons. And if you don't know about it, trust and believe someone in your community, your close constituency, those stakeholders that you're going to need to shop at your grocery store and patronize your cooperative may have done their research and they may know about it. So really consider, people say it's like selling your soul. Really consider who it is that you share your soul with, because it could be sold.
I'm going to say that is one of the more powerful things I've heard in this series so far. Thank you.
You're welcome. Honesty is hard sometimes, but I do believe that the truth sets us free.
I do think it's a side to that kind of funding that, you know, we haven't had that kind of funding too much in food co-ops yet, and now a lot of people are getting it, and it's something we're all going to have to think about pretty hard.
Yes. Very much so, especially currently in this time and dispensation. Gentrification is real. And when we're talking about developing our communities with these grocery stores are one of the 4 pillars of a community. Every community needs a bank, a school, a hospital, and a grocery store. And if we're putting in that 4th pillar, we need to understand what that brings along with it. I knocked on the door of a real estate agent who told me, just go ahead and build the grocery store. I'm ready to sell some houses. And in my mind, I thought, who's going to buy these houses? Because at the time I had already began focusing on unified power program and a community land trust so that people would have opportunities for upward mobility. But they first need opportunities to be able to generate revenue, because we know what NAFTA did. It took a lot of our corporations out of our communities. Our industrialized urban cores were deindustrialized. So where are these people coming from? They're not talking about people within our community buying houses. They're talking about people who have committed to white flight, or people who have not ever stayed in our community coming to our community and ultimately outpricing us, because we don't still make the same amount in wages and labor as our counterparts. And so gentrification is a real threat in our communities. We need to be very conscious of how we get these cooperatives off the ground and how we are going to sustain them with the people who have lived in the communities and really deserve the access to the healthy foods. All right, good questions, tough answers. All right, number 3, rotate in and out of circles. Sometimes we overstay our welcome. Dynamic business comes from dynamic relationships. I say here that while mission alignment is critical, there are several different types of partners that we share our vision, that share our vision. So basically what that's saying is, like, we know, especially in the Black community, we have thousands of churches. So sometimes you may find a pastor. That was one way that I really organized heavily around, was faith-based. And I had Baptist pastors, I had non-denominational pastors, I had Pentecostal pastors, I had people from mosques, I had Catholics, a lot of different ones, and it was fine. But be careful, because sometimes when you partner and you're not partnering in an equitable way, then other people feel cut out. So I use that faith-based initiative as an opportunity to bring them all together every chance I got. So rather than having a meeting at just one religious entity, I would have a meeting as central as possible and invite the different religious leaders to the table to have an open forum discussion. And integrity and communication is important. It's very important that you do what you say you're going to do and that you communicate clearly. As you saw from the previous slide, I believe it's very important that we not only talk the talk, but we walk the walk. Be authentic, be who you are. You know, I saw this lady today and she kind of stumbled at the library, and I said, be careful, we only have one of you. And that's the mentality that we need to have, not only with understanding what we bring to the table, but also respecting and honoring what other people bring to the table. There's only one of each of us. And so there is so much value in that. It's not necessary to try to assimilate and become something that you're not. The only thing that you should become that you're not is better than who you were yesterday. And that is my last slide.
Perfectly timed. Do we have comments, questions? And I think at this point, Ken, you're okay with the people unmuting if they want to chat?
Yeah, I love that. I'm gonna stop sharing.
What you got, Linda?
Kenya, I just want to ask, the thing you're involved in now, that's a community land trust?
It is.
Okay, can you put your contact information? Because I've got a group here that would probably love to hook up with you about that.
I can put it in the chat. Okay.
Oh, thank you so much, Leah.
I can take care of that so you can talk to people.
Okay, great. Yes, the Community Land Trust is what I'm working on. It's called Unified Power. I've lately been really focusing on Black love. I believe that our communities grow well when we have strong relationships, familiar relationships. And so I've really began to focus on 5 areas of accountability for our community, starting off with self-accountability, as I talked about, being our authentic selves, moving on to our familial accountability, making sure that we're taking care of our spouses and our significant others and our children. And then once we've been accountable to those 2 very important entities, we can really focus on our community, getting back to our neighbors and what our neighbors may need, what our neighbors may want, what our neighbors may desire. And then I believe that we have a strong core that we can look at things like economical responsibility. How are we making purchases? How are we spending our dollars? Are we just running to the mall to give our money to the mall? Or are we having economic accountability to our communities that have been divested from and disenfranchised? Are we looking for Black cobblers? Are we looking for Black plumbers? Are we looking for people in our community that could really utilize that money rotating within our community? And lastly, political accountability, because we have to consider politics. And sometimes that means you have to create another arm of what you're doing because of the laws that, you know, are around nonprofits and such, but do what you have to do. I created an organization called Black Action Everywhere, and we're currently working on a voters league so that we can be part of the political process and be able to help individuals that are making decisions and legislation to make those decisions that put us in the game at the table and not just, you know, victims of circumstance when decisions are made that don't really help our community by our elected officials. So we've been doing great here. I mean, we have 2 individuals sitting on a 4-person commission that were not brought in by the Democratic machine. And so we're really happy with how that's been going. I do believe that we're at that 5th place of just accountability, overall accountability, and that's critical. I would love to share more about the land trust though, and some of the models that we've been exploring. And yeah, that'd be great. Ty, did you have something?
I want to say, you know, I was kind of late to to your presentation, but I think I'm going to get an opportunity to see your slides later. But I'm really encouraged by your words, and up to what I heard up to now, I'm really encouraged, and I feel I'm on the right path because in my situation, my day-to-day job is a commercial real estate agent, and so and I worked in good markets and I've worked in bad markets, but I see opportunity for a co-op in my community where I'm from. I'm from a small steel mill town in Pennsylvania, and the reason why I became a part of this presentation, or really tapped into FCI, is to really learn about how do I put it together, because there's an opportunity. I see the data, I see the numbers, I see the Black dollars going outside of our community and not being able to service areas within our community where we need food. And I'm partnered with a local community college who has a food. They basically have a food council, and I'm a part of the food council. And I'm planning to present to them and share my idea of possibly bringing a co-op to the area. But it just can't be me. It has to be more. It has to be a collective, and they're willing to help me. The good thing is, by me having commercial real estate experience, understanding leases and negotiating leases, I've identified a location that works. And I've already reached out to those owners, and they're willing to work with me to where we can negotiate a pretty good rate and figure out kind of the, how do we build it out, what the landlord will do, what we'll do. So I can work, that's my lane. So I'm very comfortable doing that. But I'm really excited about it. And like I said, I really appreciate your words of encouragement and kind of some of the models you've done to really get my wheels turning. And so, so thank you very much. I appreciate it.
You're welcome, Ty. And as a professional, think about when you start thinking of how you can bring in other cooperators, think about the other key stakeholders that you're going to need to take your project to the next level. So identify some Black architects, identify some Black accountants, some people that are, into some of those areas that you will definitely need assistance with. You're going to need assistance with developing out that pro forma for that location. So think about any of those architecture, financing, banking, go sit at some banks and talk with them, investors that you could possibly engage now, because those people not only are thinking about their professions, but community development. And that's what you're talking about here is community development. Thank you, Ty.
Yeah, thank you.
If anyone wants to say, and I can talk a few more words if Kenya's available after the week, but I was trying to end on time. So I'm going to just take this moment to thank Kenya for bringing all of her experience and just wisdom. I'm so excited that you're able to join us. I got this email. We asked people if they wanted to present, and I got this email from Kenya. I'm like, so I'm very excited that you're here with us. And if you all will humor me for just a second, I do want to make sure you know about what's coming up tomorrow, because we are very excited that tomorrow at noon Central, 1 Eastern, You Can't Give People a Co-op with Malik Yakini from Detroit People's Co-op. And if you want to talk about a co-op that has thought about making sure that they're hiring as many Black professionals in their community as possible in the building of their co-op, which is currently being built from the ground up right now, Malik and his crew have really thought about that. They provided some amazing leadership around that. And he's going to be talking about how you engage a community and moving from the concept of building a co-op to give to the community versus building a co-op with a community. So I think it's going to be an amazing session. Then we have Main Street Market, something completely different. This is about a model that has worked very well in ultra rural, tiny communities. This is not a co-op. It's an independently owned store that was looking to solve the fact that there was no food access in a very rural community, but they've developed a model they're happy to share with everyone else who's in small rural communities that might really work. They're having a lot of success, and it's something very different. And then getting into the pragmatic day-to-days of running a startup food co-op, ordering and offering t-shirts is actually a really big step in getting out your brand and all that marketing that Kenya was talking about, but it's more fraught and complicated than it sounds. And Jerry Nash, who has done this numerous times, is really going to break it down for us in his perfected model for how to order t-shirts, how to offer t-shirts in a way that works for your co-op. So last, I have to real quickly thank our sponsors, without which would not be possible. So thank you so much to the USDA, National Cooperative Bank, National Cooperative Grocers, and CoBank for making this series possible. We appreciate you guys. All right. And with that, I'm going to stop recording. I hope to see many of you in the rest of the